Okay, let's dive deeper into something we all, grapple with. Reading people.
Hmm.
It's that endlessly fascinating attempt to understand what makes others tick, their thoughts, their feelings, why they do what they do.
Yeah.
And the material you've shared with us on this is really, really rich. It covers, well, everything from deep psychology to like practical observation tips.
It's a fundamental human desire, isn't it?
Mhm.
To really connect, to understand the people around us.
Totally.
But as these sources point out, our attempts often fall a bit short. We tend to rely on intuition, on hunches that aren't always grounded in, well, solid evidence.
Right. Hunches are tricky. So the mission for this deep dive is to cut through some of that noise, and pull out the genuinely useful insights.
Right.
We want to move beyond those kind of shaky gut feelings and explore actual frameworks that can sharpen our ability to understand others. Think of it as like giving your people reading skills a serious upgrade.
Precisely. It's about shifting from purely subjective takes to something more evidence-based.
Yeah.
Focusing on gathering reliable data, what people actually say, their nonverbals, even their environment, and then, analyzing that information intelligently.
And the payoffs for getting better at this, according to your sources, seem pretty significant.
Oh, definitely.
We're talking about more compassion, because you kind of get where someone's coming from. Better communication, because you pick up on what's not being said.
Right.
Stronger negotiation, clearer boundaries, because you can anticipate needs better. And maybe, surprisingly, a deeper understanding of ourselves, too.
That self-reflection piece is key.
So it's a huge landscape. Where do we even start?
Well, the sources wisely begin by tackling the inherent challenges, the roadblocks we hit when we try to read people.
Okay.
A big one is just recognizing the problem of our own subjectivity and our biases.
Right. Okay, let's unpack that. Our minds are constantly building these simplified maps of people. Yeah.
Mental models.
These models help us navigate socially, but they're always incomplete. We can't possibly grasp, the full complexity of another person.
Yeah. That's a crucial point. These models, they're useful shortcuts, sure, but they're also inherently limited.
And this is where confirmation bias creeps in.
Exactly. We have this natural tendency to remember the times our judgment seemed right, which makes us feel good about our instincts.
Yeah, boosts the confidence.
Right. But we conveniently forget all the times we were way off base. It's like selectively picking the evidence that fits what we already think.
Like keeping score, but only counting your own goals. So how do we fight against that biased view?
The sources really stress establishing a clear baseline for someone's normal behavior.
A baseline, okay.
You can't accurately interpret a deviation like, is someone quiet because they're mad, or is that just them? Unless you know their usual way of being, you need their normal operating mode.
That makes total sense. Context, their default settings.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just about the other person, is it? Our own stuff, our internal world really colors how we see others.
Absolutely. Our own biases, expectations, values,
Yeah.
even our, unconscious drives, they all act like filters.
Filters, yeah.
Shaping our perceptions, our judgments. We might project our own anxieties onto someone else without even realizing it.
This reminds me of something really interesting from one of the articles, that social intelligence test from Simon Baron-Cohen.
Ah, yes. The reading the mind in the eyes test.
Right. Tell us a bit about how that works.
Well, what's intriguing is it tries to quantify this ability.
Mm-hmm.
It shows you pictures, just the eye region of different faces.
Just the eyes.
Yeah. And you pick one word out of 4 options that best describes the emotion being expressed.
And what are the typical scores? What do they tell us?
The average is around 26 out of 36. Interestingly, scores below 22 have been seen in some people with autism, which suggests, possible differences in how social information is processed.
Hmm.
And if you're curious, the test is actually available online.
Okay, we should probably mention that link. It was socialintelligence.leventhewild.org.
That's the one.
Sounds potentially insightful, no pun intended. But the source material also flags some, limitations with this test.
Right, that's important. It's not perfect. Your vocabulary matters for understanding the emotion words, obviously.
Sure.
And culture can influence how you interpret expressions. Plus, it's only looking at one tiny piece inferring emotion just from the eyes. It's just one part of a much bigger social intelligence puzzle.
But even with those caveats, the core message is still pretty significant, isn't it?
Absolutely. It really highlights that social skills vary a lot between people.
Mm-hmm.
And just relying on your gut feeling isn't always enough.
Mm-hmm.
We might think we're great at reading people, but this test can be a useful reality check, a baseline for yourself.
And the sources offer a really encouraging angle here that these skills aren't fixed. You can actually get better at this stuff.
Exactly. It encourages you, the listener, maybe consider taking it as a starting point. See where you land.
Right.
And as you practice the things we're talking about, you might even see your score improve over time. It's learnable.
Okay, so we've acknowledged the challenges, our own biases. Where do we go next to get better at understanding others?
The sources then dive into the crucial role of motivation. Understanding the why behind behavior is absolutely key.
Okay, motivation. Moving beyond surface observations to the deeper drivers. And one of the first big ideas here is Jung's concept of the shadow. Sounds dark.
Well, it can be, but it's fascinating. The idea is we all have this unconscious part, the shadow, holding all the traits and impulses we find unacceptable, things we don't like about ourselves, or that society frowns upon.
Our hidden side.
Kind of, yeah. The counterpart to our polished public image.
And how does this hidden part affect our behavior and how we see others?
Well, the sources use that classic example, the middle-aged guy suddenly buying a flashy sports car.
Right. Midlife crisis car.
It might be seen as an unconscious compensation, maybe trying to make up for feeling like youth is fading, something they're pushing down consciously. See, repressing that shadow takes energy, and eventually those unacknowledged bits tend to leak out somehow, indirectly.
So understanding someone's shadow could actually make you more empathetic.
Absolutely. If you realize someone acting really aggressive might be unconsciously pushing down their own vulnerability or fear shadow stuff, you can see them differently.
Okay.
With more understanding, more compassion, you see the whole person, not just the difficult surface.
And this understanding can even help you communicate better.
Precisely. If you get that someone projecting extreme arrogance might deep down have a shadow full of self-doubt,
Right.
you can change how you talk to them. Instead of challenging the arrogance head-on, which might just make them defensive,
Yeah, put the walls up.
you interact in a way that maybe subtly acknowledges the insecurity underneath.
It's like talking to the hidden parts, too, not just the conscious person. The sources also mention projection, that the shadow gets projected onto others. What does that look like?
Projection is when we unconsciously stick our own unacceptable thoughts or feelings onto someone else. We see faults in them that are actually ours, but we can't admit it. Yeah. But the sources are clear. The goal isn't to play amateur psychologist or cash people out.
Good point.
It's really about appreciating human complexity in others and ourselves.
And it sounds like how we react to other people can be a mirror to our own shadow.
Exactly. If something in someone else really pushes your buttons, it might well be reflecting something you haven't dealt with in yourself. The sources even mention the idea of a collective shadow for groups or cultures, things a whole community might refuse to see about itself.
Wow. So the key takeaway with the shadow is approach it with curiosity and maybe some kindness, both for others and ourselves.
Exactly. See the wholeness, not just the curated version we usually show.
Okay. Shifting from the shadow, another powerful motivator discussed is the inner child. This brings a different, maybe more emotional feel to understanding adult behavior.
Yeah, it's quite insightful. The idea is that part of our unconscious still holds on to our childhood experiences and feelings. Those early years have a huge impact, shaping both our shadow and our conscious adult personality.
So when an adult has a seemingly huge emotional reaction, like way over the top anger or fear of criticism, that could actually be their inner child reacting, like it's still stuck in the past.
That's exactly the suggestion. If someone blows up over a minor disagreement, it might be their inner child feeling threatened or ignored, like a kid having a tantrum because their needs aren't met.
Right, the reaction feels bigger than the situation warrants.
Yeah, it's out of sync.
The sources give a helpful example of how to handle that by trying to engage the adult part of the person, even when they're acting childish.
Exactly. Instead of getting sucked into the drama, you address their rational adult side.
Okay.
That can really shift the dynamic and help calm things down. It's about recognizing where that intense emotion might be coming from, not just reacting to the surface behavior.
Okay, another core motivator, one we hear about a lot, is the drive to seek pleasure and avoid pain. Seems pretty straightforward.
It does on the surface, yeah, but the sources dig into some interesting nuances.
Like what?
Well, while we generally move towards pleasure and away from pain, avoiding pain is often a much stronger motivator. Think survival instincts, right? Avoiding harm usually overrides wanting immediate pleasure.
The classic treasure chest versus the oncoming truck example. You dodge the truck first.
Exactly. But the sources also stress it's our perceptions of pleasure and pain that drive us. And those perceptions can be kind of flawed.
How so?
Our brain makes predictions about pleasure pain, but they aren't always accurate. The example of, like, jalapeno-flavored grasshoppers is great.
Ew.
The idea of eating a bug might seem gross based on culture, even if the actual taste could be fine or even good. It's the perception.
Got it. And we also tend to prioritize immediate pleasure and pain over long-term stuff. The smoker example illustrates that perfectly.
Exactly. Immediate satisfaction wins over distant potential pain. The sources even touch on rational choice theory from economics.
Ah, Homo economicus.
Right, and its limits. It reminds us we're not always purely rational calculators maximizing pleasure. Real humans are messier than that.
But understanding someone's perception of pain can be useful, like turning tidying up into a game so it feels less painful.
Precisely. If you know what someone finds unpleasant, you can frame things differently, more effectively.
Okay.
But, and this is important, the sources also say pleasure pain isn't everything. Think about acts of incredible altruism, like Holocaust prisoners sharing food.
Right.
That shows other powerful motivators are at play, like belonging, compassion.
Which leads us nicely into Maslow's hierarchy of needs, a classic model, but still relevant for understanding motivation.
Definitely. The key is its hierarchy. Basic physiological needs, food, water, shelter, are the foundation. Those have to be met before higher needs like safety, love, esteem, and finally self-actualization become the main drivers.
So someone struggling just to survive will have totally different motivations than someone secure and focused on personal growth. The example of the counselor at the women's shelter really highlights that.
Exactly. Knowing where someone is on that hierarchy gives you a framework for understanding their priorities and what's likely driving them. Right.
And the sources note people can get stuck at lower levels if those basic needs aren't consistently met.
Okay. Finally, under motivation, the sources talk about the defense of the ego, another powerful, often unconscious driver.
Absolutely crucial, this one. Protecting the ego, our sense of self, our identity, our worth, is incredibly powerful and mostly unconscious.
So when the ego feels threatened by criticism, failure, whatever,
It activates defense mechanisms fast to ease the discomfort.
and this can lead to some creative reality bending.
Precisely. The ego's main job isn't always objective truth. It's maintaining a comfortable sense of self. That's where self-deception comes in. We might unconsciously twist reality, even lie to ourselves to avoid uncomfortable truths.
And these aren't deliberate lies we tell ourselves, more like automatic strategies.
Exactly. These ego defenses run largely outside awareness. The sources give great examples like blaming others for not making the team or rationalizing bad choices to protect our self-esteem. The example of Fred, the fan who refuses to believe anything bad about his pop star idol, really shows how deep that can go.
It's powerful denial, yeah. And the sources list common defense mechanisms we see.
Right. Things like denial, rationalization, the sour grapes thing.
Repression, displacement, kicking the cat instead of the boss.
Projection, reaction formation, acting the opposite of how you feel.
And regression, acting childish under stress. Recognizing these helps us understand why people act in ways that seem illogical, even self-defeating.
Okay.
The key is, when the ego feels threatened, self-preservation often trumps rationality.
So we've looked at these deep, often hidden motivators. Now let's shift to something more visible, nonverbal cues. People reveal a lot through body language, facial expressions,
Right.
often without realizing it.
Absolutely right. The idea is, even if we control our words, our bodies often betray our true feelings or intentions. The sources start with the face, specifically microexpressions.
Okay, microexpressions, those super brief, involuntary flashes of emotion on the face, lasting just a split second.
Exactly. So fast we often don't consciously notice them. But they can reveal underlying emotion even when someone's trying to hide it.
Right.
The sources describe the specific looks associated with basic emotions: happiness, sadness, disgust, anger, fear, surprise.
So like a quick, tiny tightening of the lips might show nervousness, even if they sound confident.
Precisely. Or a barely visible eye roll suggesting dislike, rapid blinking indicating stress, or maybe an uneven smile hinting it's not genuine. But it's crucial to remember these little tells can also just mean general discomfort, nervousness, maybe even just thinking hard, not necessarily deception.
So it's fascinating, but not a foolproof lie detector on its own, more like another piece of the puzzle.
Exactly. Using context, look at the bigger picture. Focus on what the expression usually means, not just hunting for lies. It's about subtle awareness.
Got it. Now, let's broaden out to body language. This feels like a bigger, maybe more obvious area.
It is. And the sources highlight Joe Navarro, former FBI guy, who calls the body a billboard, advertising our inner state.
A billboard, I like that.
Like microexpressions, body language mainly shows discomfort or a mismatch between feelings and outward expression.
And our limbic brain, the instinctual part, drives these automatic, honest responses, right?
Absolutely. Our thinking brain tries to control words, maybe expressions, but the limbic brain often reacts truthfully through the body. That old fight, flight, freeze response still shows up in subtle ways today, like those pacifying behaviors. The sources mention unconscious, self-soothing things we do when stressed.
Right, like touching your face or neck, fiddling with hair, wringing hands.
Even a sudden yawn or that weird leg cleansing thing wiping down your leg, all can signal underlying tension.
The sources also connect limb positions to protecting the body, like crossed arms being a subconscious block.
Or wringing hands showing lack of control, clenched fists suggesting unease.
And our legs and feet, too, often overlooked.
Definitely. Happy feet, bouncing or tapping can show positive feelings. Feet pointing to the exit might mean they want to leave, subconsciously. Crossed legs, like crossed arms, often signal being closed off.
And then there's our whole body in space, leaning in or away, standing your ground or stepping back.
Right. All communicate comfort, interest, dominance. The key seems to be, are their movements generally constricting or expanding?
Constricting or expanding. That's a good summary.
Open, expansive posture usually means comfort, confidence. Constricted, closed-off posture often suggests discomfort, anxiety, fear, and the sources rightly say interpreting this stuff becomes more intuitive if we just pay attention.
So it's not about focusing on one single gesture, but looking for clusters of behavior pointing the same way.
Absolutely. One gesture out of context means little, but several cues together, all suggesting, say, anxiety, that's more reliable. And look for incongruence, a mismatch between words and body language. That's critical.
And mirroring, when someone starts copying your posture or gestures.
Yeah, that's often a subconscious sign of liking, agreement, building rapport.
Interesting.
The sources also mention observing the energy flow in a group, even hearing smiles in someone's voice over the phone.
Hearing smiles, yeah.
It's about discerning the underlying intention. Aggression, submission, relaxation, maybe romantic interest, anxiety.
Okay.
They give general patterns. Closing in often means guarded. Opening up is friendly. Leaning forward can be dominant or interested. Preening might hint at romance. Striking posture could be energy, maybe aggression. Repetitive moves might show agreement. It's all about how they're holding themselves.
Holding on, holding back, holding tight. That gives a much richer picture than just words.
Precisely. It's tuning into that silent language that's always being spoken.
Okay, let's move into another set of tools. Frameworks for analyzing personality and identity. Personality tests come up first.
Right. While not something you do in the moment, understanding these frameworks helps make sense of behavior patterns you see over time. The sources start with the Big Five, or OCEAN.
OCEAN. Openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, neuroticism. Quick recap of what each means.
Sure. Openness. Imaginative, independent versus practical, conventional. High openness suggests valuing novelty, curiosity. Conscientiousness. Organized, careful versus disorganized, impulsive. High C often means valuing planning, reliability. Extroversion. Sociable, affectionate versus reserved, solitary. High E suggests getting energy from social interaction.
Got it.
Agreeableness. Kind, sympathetic versus critical, uncooperative. High A suggests valuing harmony, cooperation.
And neuroticism.
Tendency towards anxiety, moodiness versus stable, calm. High N might mean more prone to stress.
So knowing where someone generally falls on these spectrums gives clues about their motivations and values. Like high conscientiousness means they're likely motivated by planning and responsibility.
Exactly. The sources give more examples of how traits show up in behavior. Then they move to Myers-Briggs, the MBTI. Very popular.
Hugely popular. What's the basic idea there?
It uses 4 dichotomies: extroversion, introversion, sensing, intuition, thinking, feeling, judging, perceiving. It sorts people into one of 16 types based on their preferences. Originally, it was meant to help people find jobs suited to their innate personality.
Can you briefly explain those 4 pairs?
Okay. EI, where you direct energy outward or inward. SN, how you take in info, concrete facts, or patterns, possibilities.
Right.
TF, how you make decisions, logic, or values emotions. And JP, how you like your outer world, structured, decisive, or flexible, open.
So combining preferences gives you a type, but the sources also mention MBTI has its critics, its limitations.
That's right. It gets criticized for oversimplifying into boxes, leading to stereotypes. And retest reliability can be inconsistent. You might get a different type later.
Okay, then there are the Kiersey temperaments, which group the MBTI types.
Exactly. Kiersey organizes the 16 types into 4 broader temperaments: Guardian, SJ, Artisan SP, Idealist, NF, and Rational NT.
Oh, okay.
Each has core characteristics, needs, strengths. It's another way to see broader patterns, grouping people by these similarities. It also talks about roles within each temperament.
And finally, the Enneagram, another model. This one with 9 types. How's it different?
The Enneagram is really insightful because it focuses on the core fears and core desires driving each of the 9 types.
Fears and desires. Okay.
The sources briefly describe each type: perfectionist, helper, achiever, etc., highlighting their key motivations, behaviors, potential blind spots.
Mm.
And unlike MBTI's strict types, Enneagram suggests people can show traits from multiple types, though one is usually dominant.
So with all these models, Big Five, MBTI, Kiersey, Enneagram, how do we actually use them when observing people? We're not giving them tests.
The key is to use them as frameworks. Develop hypotheses about people based on their behavior over time and test those hypotheses.
Right.
Like if someone's consistently organized, detail-oriented, responsible, you might hypothesize they're high in conscientiousness, maybe a guardian type.
Okay.
Then you keep watching for more clues that fit or challenge that idea. The sources give an example: seeing forceful body language, initially labeling it forceful, then reconsidering with these models, maybe shifting to confident rational.
So it's about having these frameworks in your mental toolkit while observing, making more informed, nuanced guesses about personality and motivation.
Precisely. They give you a richer lens to understand the different ways people operate.
Now let's tackle a really popular topic: detecting deception. The sources offer valuable insights, but also caution against common myths.
That's absolutely right. They start by saying, look, detecting lies is hard. There's no magic bullet. Even good liars know the supposed tells and try to fake them or avoid them. And nervousness doesn't automatically mean lying. It can mean lots of things.
Yeah, so the focus shifts, not just spotting lies, but understanding why we get fooled and upgrading our overall assessment skills.
Exactly. The same skills for understanding values and personality needed tune-up when deception might be involved. And the sources really stress skillful conversation as the main tool.
So forget the old myths. Shifty eyes, looking up and right. Those aren't reliable.
Largely debunked, yeah. Effective lie detection through conversation is more about guiding the talk so the person reveals inconsistencies, trips themselves up. Using surprise questions to throw them off their script.
Yeah.
Paying close attention to sudden changes from their baseline confidence, speech speed, eye contact, or getting evasive answers to simple questions.
What about increasing cognitive load? Making it harder for them to lie.
Exactly. Lying takes more brain power than telling the truth. So tactics like asking for the story in reverse chronological order.
Ooh, tricky.
Or asking unexpected tangential questions they haven't prepared for. Or even asking the same question later in the conversation.
Right.
These can overload their mental bandwidth, making it harder to keep the fake story straight. Errors creep in. Even hinting at consequences if they're lying adds stress, increases that load.
And observing emotion is still relevant, but again, it's about the whole pattern, the cluster of behaviors.
Precisely. Not one single tell. Look for clusters suggesting underlying guilt, nervousness, fear of getting caught, maybe even excitement. Establishing their baseline behavior in a neutral context is crucial. Then you spot deviations when deception might be happening. Unusually long or overly detailed stories can sometimes be a red flag, ironically.
Right.
And while things like more blinking or speech stumbles might happen,
Right.
the emphasis is really on strategic conversation, being more reliable than just trying to read body language for lies.
So the takeaway is, be a skilled observant interviewer. Ask smart questions. Watch for inconsistencies in the story and emotional responses over time. Don't just look for stereotypical liar signs.
Exactly. It's more active, strategic, and thoughtful than just passively watching for potentially misleading cues.
Okay, our final big section looks at the power of observation over time. Not just first impressions, but building understanding through repeated interactions.
That's absolutely right. Getting to know someone allows for much more accurate assessments. You gather more data, get a feel for their patterns. But the sources also discuss snap judgments, or thin slicing.
Ah, yes, Malcolm Gladwell's blink idea, that we can sometimes make surprisingly accurate judgments really quickly.
Exactly. Research suggests these immediate, intuitive appraisals can sometimes be more accurate than deliberate analysis.
Oh,
But our emotional state affects accuracy, and biases can cloud things.
sure.
It seems skilled people readers use both intuition and deliberate thought. Gut feeling plus data gathering. The sources give an example of a gut feeling in an interview leading to more digging that uncovered a problem.
And some jobs really rely on that thin slicing skill. Cops, ER docs, negotiators.
Now, moving on to analyzing speech patterns and word choices over time, this can reveal a lot.
How so?
The words we choose unconsciously reflect values, personality, biases, beliefs, attitudes.
Right.
Like using overly complex jargon unnecessarily might suggest a desire to seem smart. Or constantly using military metaphors for dating reveals a certain worldview about relationships. Even pronoun use lots of I versus we, hints at focus, connection, or independence.
And how someone phrases things can reveal their sense of blame or responsibility.
Right. But the sources wisely say decoding word choice is more art than science. Context is key. They offer good questions to ask yourself while listening. What pronouns do they use? How emotional is their language? Any jargon? $10 words? Swearing patterns. Does vocabulary show a certain frame of reference? Do they use words you might not know?
It's about active listening for the subtext, not just the literal words. Then reading people through appearance and possessions.
Absolutely. Clothing, grooming, even our homes communicate identity, values, state of mind. Lack of grooming might signal low self-esteem, depression. Deliberate status symbols reveal self-concept, values. Clothes meant to attract, sexually show priorities.
And our homes and stuff, extensions of ourselves.
Totally. Reflecting needs, tastes, values. Observe the openness, cleanliness. Too much stuff or too little can be indicators. Homes often display aspirations.
Right.
Sam Gosling's Snoop work has mentioned how bedroom decor can hint at personality, even politics. Objects are classed as identity claims, feeling regulators, behavioral residue. Pay attention to small details, radio stations, bumper stickers, usernames.
Like our environment is an unconscious map of our inner world. And in today's world, online behavior is huge too.
Can't ignore it. While online personas can be curated, research suggests people do tend to project their actual personalities online, maybe more than we think.
Really?
Yeah, a 2010 study by Beck et al. Links social media use to the Big Five. It found people tend to show their actual, not just ideal selves, though some traits are easier to spot.
Which ones?
Conscientiousness and extroversion often come through more clearly online. Again, look for patterns, not isolated posts. Examples given include things like posting positive, engaging photos linking to agreeableness, extroversion, conscientiousness, while more neutral photos might correlate with openness or neuroticism.
Interesting. This brings us to applying this in specific places like work, first impressions, handshakes. They matter.
Surprisingly, yes, to some extent. A 2011 study found handshake quality improved accuracy in judging conscientiousness.
Wow.
The sources describe different shakes, dominant, submissive, reluctant, persuasive, and what they might signal. Even who breaks the shake first can be a subtle cue.
Okay.
And using social media for hiring. Kluper's research suggests profiles can have some accuracy in predicting job performance, but again, context and bias are huge caveats.
Right. Tread carefully there. Finally, the sources talk about asking insightful questions, indirect ones, and asking for stories as powerful ways to understand people over time.
Exactly. Indirect questions can bypass defenses and get more revealing answers than direct ones. The sources give 6 great examples.
Like asking what prize they'd work hardest for or punishment they'd avoid.
Yeah, reveals motivators, values, pain, pleasure points. Or where they spend money versus skimp shows priorities.
Okay.
Asking about significant achievements and failures reveals self-perception, values, how the past shapes them. What's effortless versus exhausting shows natural joys and dislikes. The points distribution question, charisma, intelligence, humor, etc., reveals their ideal self. And the charity donation question shows what they care about beyond themselves.
And asking for stories.
Reveals thought patterns, behaviors. Examples like,
Yeah.
What animal represents you? Favorite movie? What would you save from a fire? What scares you most?
Right.
For all these questions, the key is listening to the emotion behind the answer, reading between the lines, understanding the why.
These techniques for observing over time, speech, possessions, questions, offer a much deeper understanding than just quick reads.
Exactly. It's about patiently building a complex picture through ongoing observation, engagement, and genuine curiosity.
Well, we have certainly covered a ton of ground here exploring how to read people, from biases to nonverbals to motivation to observation over time.
We really have. We looked at understanding motivate, the shadow, inner child, pleasure, pain, Maslow, ego defenses. We covered nonverbals, micro-expressions, body language clusters, personality models like the Big Five, MBTI, Kiersey, Enneagram, detecting deception through conversation, and the value of long-term observation, speech, appearance, online behavior, workplace cues, and asking those insightful questions and listening to stories.
And it's so crucial to remember, as the sources stress, reading people is about making informed best guesses based on data, intelligent analysis. It's not mind reading, no guarantees.
Exactly. It's a skill needing practice, learning, conscious effort. The more you practice, the better you get at noticing the patterns, the subtle cues.
And ultimately, getting better at this leads to richer, more compassionate understanding of people, better connections, better communication.
Precisely. More empathy, stronger relationships, navigating the social world with more insight.
So for you, our listener, a final thought to chew on after this deep dive. Maybe reflect on which of your own motivations and biases might be most hidden, even from yourself. And perhaps by thoughtfully observing others, you might just catch a glimpse of your own complex inner world reflected back.